everyone. I hope you are enjoying the 2023 Reese family reunion. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I've put together this little video of some fun genealogy things that I found the past year that I really wanted to share. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'm sorry if there is any crazy noise during this presentation. I am pet sitting a puppy right now, and I have some neighbors mowing the lawn. But let's go ahead and get into it anyway. In late November of last year, I was procrastinating studying for finals, and I got on Ancestry.com. I decided I should look through my old messages, and I came across this one that I had never answered. It reads, I am working on my Reese line, and I'm trying to group all of the Reeses in Bedford in the early 1800s by families in the hope that I can figure out more about my line. Do you have a source for William Barry Reese as Sally's husband? I have a copy of a deed from May 14, 1831 that lists Sally with most, if not all, of her children giving up the rights to property left at the death of Little Barry Leftwich. I can't find a connection to him, however. An article in Heritage of Bedford County, Virginia, 2003, at the Bedford Genealogical Society, written by Sherry S. Fincham, says her husband was Barry Reese, from a record in the Lincoln County Pioneer, Volume 15, January 1986, page 28. Thanks for any light you could shed on this. I was immediately intrigued, so I went to work to see what records I had. And this led me into the deepest rabbit hole I have ever gone down in all of my years of genealogical research. Before we begin, let's orient ourselves as to who the main character of the story is. Sarah Sally Reese was born in 1765 and raised at least 10 children in Bedford County, Virginia. Her son was William Gibbs, his son was Jordan Gibbs, whose son was William Michael, whose son was Elijah Morris, and his son was Luther, father to our lovely Aunt Marcy and Cynthia and the rest of our relatives. Sarah Sally Reese was, from our family records, supposedly married to a man named William Barry Reese. This is the marriage that is in question. Here's a very old map of the counties of Virginia from about the time that our family was living there. I've highlighted the county that they lived in, which was Bedford County. Now, I'm going to take you through all the documentation I could find on Sarah Sally Reese. The reason I say Sarah and not William Barry is, as you will discover, there was no documentation of him. So I'm first going to present you with all of the documents chronologically through Sarah's life, and then we will discuss the speculations afterwards. So here's the earliest document of Sarah Sally Reese. If you aren't familiar, this is what an early federal census looks like. To save paper and time, only the head of the home is listed on the left, and the census taker just takes note of how many people are in the home and puts them into the column that is associated with their age and gender. And there's Sally. So in Sally's home in 1820, there were 7 people, including her. There is no husband, and poor thing, there are 6 teenagers. As we'll learn later, she has more kids than this, and they've just already moved out. One of her older sons is actually also listed in the census on a different page with his new little family. From these numbers, we can infer that she is born before 1775. In 1823, Sally Reese is listed in the second paragraph of the will of a man named Little Barry Leftwich. Let's take a closer look at this will. It starts as all wills do. I, Little Barry Leftwich, blah, blah, blah. The first item leaves the estate to his wife, Frances, which that's off to a normal start. He also leaves several slaves to her, which quickly tells us that this is a wealthy man. The second paragraph reads, as best I could read the document. Item second, I will and devise to the children of Sally Reese, which may now exist, the tract of land on which she now lives on, lying on Wolf Creek, containing 190 odd acres, reserving to the said Sally Reese the right of living therein with the free privilege of clearing and cultivating the land with the use of the timber there, of in any way she may think proper, something for her own use and benefit, only so long as she may continue to live on the land herself and no longer. And I do further hereby something, and the said Sally, from any claims that may be nor due me or in any manner coming to me from her. The third paragraph, it has almost identical language as the previous one, except this tract of land is left to the children of a woman named Sally Thornhill. Finally, the fourth leaves the rest of his estate to his children. Next is the 1830 census, which shows Sarah Sally still living in Bedford County, Virginia. And there she is again. There are now far fewer kids in the house, potentially 2 of her kids that are in their early 20s that have yet to be married, or maybe this is a child and their spouse living with Sally. In 1831, Sarah and her children sell the land that they were left by Littlebury Leftwich. Here's the same document, just transferred into print. They sold the 190 acres to a man named Richard Hobson for $550. It is clearly stated in this document that it is the same land which was willed to Sarah and her children just 8 years before. But most importantly, it lists the names of all of her children and their spouses. This document definitively ties our family, and by that I mean William Gibbs Reese, to the Sarah Sally Reese that was in the will of Littlebury Leftwich, as it mentions that this is the land from his will. I've written the names of her children out in a bigger font and highlighted them in blue. The names not highlighted are their spouses. We have William, who we descend from, Robert W., Anne, Nancy, Featherston, Martha, James, and the single children, Wilkerson, Parthenia, and Fleming. If you need that in a different format, here is a family tree of Sally and her kids. There may have been more children that potentially died in childhood or infancy, but we know that there were at least 10 that made it to adulthood, and some lived super long lives, such as Martha, aka Patsy, who was reported to have made it to 101 years old. However, I think her family was fibbing, and she actually lived to 94. Still a very long life. So where did the family go after they sold their home in Virginia? It appears almost the entire family moved to Lincoln County, Tennessee at some point. It's still unclear to me the exact year of each family's move, but eventually almost all of Sally's children and grandchildren came to live in Lincoln County, Tennessee, except for a few of her daughters, whose husbands moved their family to Kentucky. This brings us to the next document, which was recorded in 1836. This is a tax list for the county. As you can see, there are quite a few of her boys, Robert, Featherston, and Fleming, living near her in the county. There are also other Reeses, but I'm still unaware as to how they relate to us. Here are some early maps of Tennessee from around the time that they moved. In 1800, these were Indian territory and were probably still pretty undeveloped lands by the time that they moved. I've tried to line up Virginia and Tennessee, how they sit on a map, to show you what their journey may have looked like. Now it's 1840 in Lincoln County, Tennessee. Sally is still kicking, and she lives next door to her son Robert and her daughter, her daughter Martha, aka Patsy. Robert's family is now not so little, and he and Martha are in their 40s. Sally appears to maybe be living with the same couple that were with her in the last census, but now with a young child. Martha has a slew of kids, but if you notice, she is the head of the house, and there is no male in her house that is her age, meaning she is likely widowed. Here you can see that. In 1850, the U.S. started using this style of federal census, where every member of the House is listed with their age and what state they were born in. Now, we need to zoom in a little closer for this document, but there's some goofy stuff happening. I've never actually seen a mistake of this magnitude in a census before. If you look closely, this census worker mixed his lines up for a few families. Notice that the gender listed is incorrect for almost all of the people in this section. You may have also noticed that there's an 85-year-old woman named Parthenia and Sarah listed next. I believe the census taker switched the names. Sally would have been in her 80s at this time, and the 5-year-old child that was living with her in the last census could be the 14-year-old listed here. Although in the last census, that child was a male, and it's listed as a female here. As I said, I think that the census worker royally messed things up. However, I feel very confident that this is the correct family, as there is a woman named Parthenia, which is the name of one of Sarah's daughters, and there is only who could be her son living next door with the name of Wilkerson W. Reese, but of course the wrong age listed. That would be the last document for Sarah, as she died in 1854. Her headstone said that she was 89 years old, putting her birth year at 1765, which lines up perfectly with all of the dates used in the censuses. She is buried in Mount Hermon Cemetery in Bedford County, Tennessee, which is the county directly north of Lincoln. So the family probably lived on the northern edge of Lincoln, or the county lines have moved over the years. The top left oval is the cemetery on a current Google map search, and the bottom right oval is for a Reese's mechanical shop, which I thought was too great not to point out. Also, if y'all are really sharp with the family history, you may recognize the name Womack in that Womack cemetery there in the middle, which is the last name of the wife of Jordan Gibbs Reese, which is Sarah's grandson. So let's return to the message and see if we can answer anything this nice lady asked me. The first question is, do you have a source for William Barry Reese as Sally's husband? No, we actually didn't find a single document about him. Bedford County had quite incredible lists of marriages at this point, and there was not one found between a William Barry Reese and a Sarah or a Sally. They could have been married in another place, however, but still no document has been found. The next comment is about the deed. Yes, we found this deed. Without this document, it would be incredibly difficult to learn the names of all of her children, especially her daughters. For this, I'm very thankful that they sold that piece of land and that the documents were so well preserved. Next, she says, I can't find a connection to him. Well, I'm not certain if she meant a connection to William Barry or Little Barry, but there definitely seems to be a connection to Little Barry. We'll discuss that more in a bit. I actually didn't find this record at first and had to go searching on the internet for both the article from Sherry Fincham and the article that she references. Thankfully, Sherry's great about referencing her sources, so it was pretty easy to find. Sherry is a descendant of Wilkerson Reese, one of the younger sons of Sarah Sally, and she did her own research on this topic quite a few years ago. Her article is very long, and she did tons of research on Sarah that I've printed out, and you can find that in the folder if you'd like to read that. Sherry also did not find a marriage record between William Barry and Sarah Sally. This article was about a Mr. Stone who was married to Mildred Reese, who was the daughter of Robert Reese, one of Sarah's sons. Here, the writer lists Robert as the son of Barry and Sarah Reese. Sherry notes that the writer is a grandson of Mildred, and that Mildred was still alive when this person was likely old enough to remember Mildred telling him of her grandparents, and thus that he shouldn't be wrong. However, in my opinion, a 5-generation gap is sure to be, remembered a little bit incorrectly as far as information goes. Now that we have been through all of the documentation, it's time to discuss what it all means. Here is a summary of the hard facts. No marriage document for William Barry and Sarah Sally has been found. A man named Littlebury Leftwich gave 190 acres to Sarah and her children in his will. Sarah and her children sell this land, and most of them moved to Lincoln County, Tennessee. So why did Littlebury leave the land to Sarah Reese and Sarah Thornhill when he could have left it all to his 7 children listed in the last paragraph? Well, one potential reason is that the children of Sarah might also be his children. How do we prove that theory true or false, though? These children were growing up during the time of the Revolution. Maybe they did have a father named William Barry Reese, but he died in the war. But after finding no documents and still wondering why this man, Littlebury Leftwich, would give 190 acres to a seemingly random woman, I turned to the help of a DNA test. Because we are questioning a direct male line, we can utilize Y chromosome DNA. The Y chromosome does not have another Y to recombine with like the rest of our chromosomes do, and so there's very little genetic change in the Y chromosome from father to son. Because of this, we can very accurately trace ancestors and relatives of a direct male line. So, to confirm whether or not Littlebury Leftwich is the father of Sarah's children, I ordered a Y chromosome DNA test through Family Tree DNA, which offers the best Y chromosome DNA kits, and I asked for the help of my dearest uncle, Sean Reese, to provide his saliva for the DNA test. Thanks, Uncle Sean. A few weeks after he sent in the test, we got the results back. We are of the haplogroup called R-FT172116. A haplogroup is just the name given to groups of people who share a common ancestor on either their paternal or maternal line. Let's take a look at some of Sean's closest matches of his Y chromosome DNA. These are the 5 men which have the most similar Y chromosome DNA to Sean. A caveat to this is that there are several levels to this Y chromosome testing. We are currently looking at the matches of the best test they offer, which tests 700 markers on the Y chromosome. It is a pricey test, so it's possible that there are relatives that match closely enough, but that just didn't take this level of test. However, we will look at Sean's matches on the lower level of markers as well. But first, let's start here at the 700. Jim Leftwich shares the most Y chromosome DNA with Sean and has the fewest number of mutations different from him. His oldest known male ancestor is named Augustine Leftwich, who is the father to Littlebury Leftwich. He descends from a brother of Littlebury named Uriah. William Leftwich is next in line, and his oldest known male ancestor is also Augustine Leftwich. He descends from a brother of Littlebury named William. Raymond Lee Leftwich also descends from Augustine Leftwich, and he descends from Uriah as well. Joseph Henry Thomas Jr. does not list his oldest known male line ancestor, but seems to descend from people in the North Carolina area. Toby Gatewood descends from a John Gatewood, born 1640, died 1706, from Essex, Virginia, which is the same county that the first Leftwich man came to settle. If we move down the line to the 111 markers tested, several more men show up as matches. This is because the 111 test is less expensive, so most people stop at 111 markers rather than test all the way to 700. Our most closely related male relative is named Carl Douglas Reese. He claims his earliest known ancestor is James Robert Reese, a son of Sarah, but his small tree he has attached suggests that he's actually a match to Sloman Reese, a brother of Jordan Gibbs. So this would explain why we are so closely matched. Our next closest match at 111 markers is named Martin Lindsay Reese. He is a descendant of Featherston Reese, a son of Sally, and this proves that Featherston and our ancestor William Gibbs had the same father. The next closest relatives are the men, which we already discussed at the 700 markers matched. They all descended from the father of Littlebury Leftwich, a man named Augustine. These are the next set of men that we are very closely related to. We've already discussed Joseph Henry Thomas Jr. and Toby Gatewood. The other men are Jerry A. James Jr., Edward Ray Butcher, Ralph Leftwich, whose oldest known male line ancestor is Augustine Leftwich, who we have discussed previously, and William Christopher Doss, whose oldest known male line ancestor is Richard de Leftwich, born around 1380 and died 1442 from England. The last two men that we are related to at the 111 marker are named Rene Jewett and Calvin Lincoln Gatewood. They both did not list a male ancestor. At the 67th marker, there are some more men with the last name Gatewood that we are closely related to. I'm still not sure of the relation here, but there are even more Gatewood men at the 37th marker. Speaking of the 37th marker, these two men appear. They are descendants of Robert William Reese, brother of William Gibbs. So far we've matched with the descendants of Robert, Featherston, and William, which tells us that all of these sons had the same father, who could only be Littlebury Leftwich, based on the matches and same haplogroups. The results of Sean's DNA test prove that William Barry Reese is not the father of Sarah's children. It is actually entirely possible that there never was a William Barry Reese at all, and that the name came from the nickname for Littlebury, or Barry Leftwich. Another amazing discovery is the relation to this man, Norman Thornhill. If you recall, Thornhill is the surname of the other woman that Littlebury leaves his land to in his will. This proves that Littlebury was the father to Sally Thornhill's children, too. So, I've been going on and on about this Littlebury guy, and I haven't provided you any backstory on him. So let's go into his life a little bit. Littlebury was born in Virginia in 1757. He had 2 legitimate wives and at least 7 legitimate children from his first marriage. His children all moved out of Virginia after his death and also moved to Lincoln County, Tennessee, just as our relatives did. Some of them actually lived close by each other, perhaps that they knew of one another and were friendly. Littlebury became a major in the War of 1812 and later a colonel in the Virginia militia. Littlebury had 7 brothers that all served and were high-ranking, and his father, Augustine, was a sergeant in the French and Indian Wars in 1758. Here is an excerpt from the book Leftwich Turner Families of Virginia and Their Connections. The records of Bedford County indicate that Augustine Leftwich was a man of great wealth for his day, owning a great deal of land and numerous slaves. Between the dates 1761 and 1795, that of his death, he bought and conveyed several thousand acres of land, and prior to the date of his will, he had deeded each of his children a large plantation, as well as a number of slaves and other personal property. He was a sergeant in the French and Indian Wars in 1758. It is believed that all Leftwich persons in America are descended from a man named Ralph Leftwich, born around 1628, and he was an immigrant from England who patented 300 acres of land on the Pionkatonk River in New Kent County, Virginia, on August 10th, 1658. Most of the records prior to 1860 were destroyed, but from what is left, we know that he had at least one son named Thomas, born around 1660, that died around 1730. Thomas is the father to Augustine Leftwich. While we have made some pretty interesting discoveries, we still have several questions to answer. A big one is the question of Sarah's heritage. Is she herself a Reese? Is she a widower to a Reese man but never had any of his children? Does our family have any Reese blood at all? We may never know. For now, her children and descendants all have incredible stories to be told and discovered. Unfortunately, I'm finishing up my studies and I'm currently too busy to present all the fun things I have found this year. I encourage you to go check it out for yourselves on Ancestry.com, where you can see all of the documentation on my Reese tree and do some of your own researching if you would like. Until the next family reunion, thank you for listening.